For months, Russia projected an image of confidence. State media promised victory. Analysts aligned with the Kremlin claimed momentum was shifting in Moscow's favor. Columns of armored vehicles advanced beneath Russian flags, while officials insisted the offensive was progressing according to plan. But behind the headlines, a very different reality may have been unfolding. Satellite imagery began revealing vast fields of destroyed armored vehicles. Russian military bloggers started raising difficult questions. Hospitals near the front lines reportedly became overwhelmed. Entire battalions were said to have disappeared after repeated assault operations. And then came the most concerning development of all. The losses may be significantly greater than previously understood. Today we examine the hidden cost of Russia's latest offensive, why many analysts believe Moscow is facing mounting military pressure, and how Vladimir Putin's strategy could be pushing Russia toward a critical turning point in the war. Because this conflict is no longer defined solely by territory. It is about endurance. It is about resources. And it is about whether Russia can continue sustaining a modern war while absorbing losses in manpower, equipment, and momentum at an increasingly difficult pace. Welcome back. If you are new to the channel, we provide in-depth analysis of major geopolitical conflicts, military strategy, and global power dynamics in a clear and accessible format. And today's topic may represent one of the most significant developments of the Russia-Ukraine war so far. Because behind official statements and battlefield maps, the broader reality may look very different. When Russia launched its latest offensive operations, the message from Moscow was unmistakable. This would be the moment Russia regained the initiative, after months of grinding warfare. Putin needed momentum, not only militarily, but politically as well. The Kremlin understood that the conflict was evolving into a prolonged war of endurance rather than a rapid campaign of conquest. And in wars of attrition, perception can become nearly as important as battlefield success. Russia needed visible victories. As a result, Russian commanders intensified operations across multiple fronts. Artillery bombardments increased, mechanized assaults expanded, drone strikes became more frequent. Russian forces attempted to apply continuous pressure on Ukrainian defenses in the hope that sustained assaults would eventually break through. Initially, some analysts believed the strategy might succeed. Russian forces managed to secure limited territorial gains in several contested areas, slowly and at considerable cost. But as more detailed assessments emerged, the picture became increasingly concerning. According to multiple battlefield evaluations and open-source intelligence analysts, Russian casualty rates during major assault operations rose sharply. Armored columns were destroyed at higher than expected rates. Infantry assaults suffered severe losses, and some newly mobilized units reportedly entered combat with insufficient training. What further complicated the situation was the nature of the battlefield itself. This was not the type of fast-moving warfare many military planners traditionally prepare for. Ukraine had transformed large sections of the front into heavily defended kill zones, minefields, drone surveillance, precision artillery, FPV attack drones, anti-tank missile systems, long-range strike capabilities. Modern warfare had fundamentally altered the battlefield environment. Virtually every movement could be monitored. Convoys could be targeted rapidly. Large troop concentrations faced immediate risk of attack. And despite Russia's numerical advantages in certain sectors, advancing under these conditions proved extraordinarily costly. Yet Moscow continued pressing forward. Why? Because politically, Putin may believe he cannot afford to stop. For Vladimir Putin, this war is no longer simply a military operation. It has become deeply connected to Russia's international image and to his own political legacy. From the beginning, the Kremlin framed the conflict as a demonstration of Russian strength and influence. It was intended not only as a message to Ukraine, but also to NATO, Europe, and the United States. However, more than 2 years into the war, the reality has become far more complex. Instead of achieving a rapid victory, Russia entered a prolonged war of attrition. Instead of weakening NATO, the conflict strengthened Western unity. And rather than diminishing Western influence globally, the war triggered one of the largest military support efforts in recent history. This has created significant pressure on the Kremlin. The longer the conflict continues without decisive success, the more difficult it becomes to maintain the image of strength Russia seeks to project domestically and internationally. This is why offensive operations remain politically important. Even limited territorial gains can be presented through state media as evidence that victory remains achievable. But there is a critical problem. Territory can sometimes be regained. Experienced personnel cannot be replaced easily. According to many analysts, Russia may now be facing growing shortages in some of the areas modern warfare depends on most. Trained officers, specialized vehicle crews, experienced assault units, technical operators, logistics coordination personnel. These are capabilities that require years to develop. And as casualties increase, maintaining operational quality becomes increasingly difficult. This helps explain why Russian recruitment efforts have expanded to include mobilization campaigns, financial incentives, regional enlistment drives, and earlier reliance on prison recruitment programs. The Kremlin rarely discusses these challenges publicly. However, independent observers both inside and outside Russia continue to point toward the same conclusion. The war is consuming enormous amounts of manpower, and modern wars are not won through manpower alone. One of the primary reasons losses have become so severe is because the battlefield itself has evolved dramatically. This conflict is rapidly becoming the first large-scale drone war in modern history. Low-cost FPV drones, costing only a fraction of a tank's value, are now capable of destroying multi-million-dollar armored vehicles. Reconnaissance drones continuously monitor the battlefield, transmitting targeting coordinates to artillery units within seconds. Soldiers on both sides increasingly describe a battlefield where concealment is becoming nearly impossible. Entire assault operations can now be tracked in real time from the air, and once detected, units often face immediate strikes from artillery, drones, or precision-guided systems. For Russian offensives, this presents a major challenge. Large-scale mechanized advances, the type of warfare Russia historically relied upon, have become significantly more dangerous. Vehicle columns moving together create highly visible targets. Troop concentrations become vulnerable almost immediately. Supply routes can be monitored continuously. The transparency created by drone warfare has fundamentally reshaped military operations. Ukraine adapted quickly. Rather than attempting to mirror Russia symmetrically in every area, Ukrainian forces increasingly focused on asymmetric tactics, drone saturation attacks, precision strikes, hit-and-run operations, deep strikes against logistics infrastructure. The objective was not always immediate territorial recovery. It was attrition. To make every Russian advance as costly as possible. And in many sectors, that strategy appears to be having a significant impact. But manpower losses may represent only part of the challenge. Equipment losses are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Since the beginning of the war, analysts tracking visually confirmed losses have documented substantial numbers of destroyed or abandoned Russian military assets. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery systems, air defense platforms, helicopters. Some losses resulted directly from combat. Others stemmed from mechanical failures or logistical problems. Although Russia still possesses large Soviet-era stockpiles, another issue has emerged. Quantity does not necessarily equal effectiveness. Older vehicles removed from storage often require extensive repairs, upgrades, or modernization before deployment. Many of these systems were designed decades ago for a very different type of warfare. Today they face precision drones, satellite surveillance, and advanced anti-tank weapons. The result is clear. Even heavily armored systems are increasingly vulnerable. And as equipment losses continue, pressure on Russia's defense industry intensifies. Factories can expand production. But modern warfare consumes equipment at an extraordinary rate, particularly during prolonged offensive operations. Western sanctions have also complicated access to certain advanced technologies and components, forcing Russia to adapt its supply chains under wartime conditions. Yet despite these obstacles, Russia continues increasing defense production and expanding military manufacturing capacity. That reveals something important. The Kremlin appears prepared for a prolonged conflict, and that may be one of the most significant realities shaping the future of this war. Because this conflict is no longer limited to Ukraine alone. It has evolved into a broader geopolitical contest involving power, influence, endurance, and the future balance of the international system. Russia appears to be betting that time will eventually weaken Western unity, that political divisions within Europe and the United States will deepen, that military aid fatigue will increase, that economic pressures will reshape public opinion. Meanwhile, Ukraine and its allies are betting on the opposite outcome, that Russia's losses will eventually become unsustainable, that sanctions, battlefield attrition, and technological adaptation will gradually reduce Moscow's ability to sustain offensive operations at the same intensity. This creates an extremely dangerous dynamic, because when both sides believe time favors them, wars often continue far longer than initially expected. But perhaps the most important question extends beyond the battlefield itself. It concerns what prolonged losses may mean inside Russia. Wars reshape societies, economies shift, budgets change, industries adapt, families absorb repeated loss. Official narratives may influence television broadcasts, but they cannot entirely erase the human cost of prolonged conflict. Every destroyed vehicle represents trained personnel. Every casualty affects communities. Every escalation increases long-term pressure. And although the Kremlin maintains strict control over information, occasional signs of tension continue to emerge through military bloggers, regional reporting, and online discussions. Some nationalist voices inside Russia have openly criticized military leadership, demanding more aggressive strategies while simultaneously acknowledging operational shortcomings. That alone suggests growing pressure beneath the surface. Because the longer wars continue, the more difficult it becomes to maintain complete control over the narrative. So where does this war go from here? That may ultimately depend on one central reality. Which side can endure longer? Russia still possesses substantial military resources. Ukraine continues receiving Western support, and both sides are adapting rapidly to changing battlefield conditions. But one fact is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Modern warfare is consuming lives and equipment at a pace not seen in decades. And if current trends continue, Russia's hidden losses may become one of the defining factors shaping the future trajectory of this conflict. Because behind every offensive headline, behind every battlefield update, behind every political statement, another story is unfolding. A story of attrition, exhaustion, and a war whose true cost may be far greater than the world fully understands. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe for more in-depth coverage of geopolitics, military strategy, and global affairs, and let us know in the comments. Do you believe Russia can sustain this war over the long term, or are the losses becoming too severe to ignore?